Has live coverage of the leadership contest for the Conservative Party. Nick Ross presents Westminster Special.
Good afternoon. In the next few minutes, the culmination of one of the most extraordinary political struggles in a generation. In what Tories themselves have called a treacherous and divisive campaign, there's a smell of cordite in the air. And the stakes are high, of course. The Daily Telegraph fears Tory extinction if the party doesn't get it right today. The Daily Mail warns of political oblivion. As candidates have fallen over the past 9 days, they've formed unpredictable alliances. Their supporters have fragmented. Thatcher's gone for Hague, Tebbit for Clarke. Where will John Redwood's 38 votes go? Nothing is readily predictable. Big Ben is striking 5 o'clock behind me. The polling has now closed. Only 164 votes to count and only 2 piles to put them in, so we might get the results very, very quickly indeed. Once again, no TV cameras have been admitted to the counting room. A bit too newfangled, it seems, for the party, so we'll have to listen out, and we won't get more than a few seconds warning. First, there were tastes of the atmosphere across the road from here, actually, inside the Palace of Westminster, and I gather some quite, what could be some significant news. Robin Oakley.
Well, indeed, it's been a careerist's nightmare, the voting in this contest, Nick, because those who want to make sure that they finish up on the winning side haven't really been able to determine what was going to be the winning side. It is a nail-bitingly close finish, as both camps are admitting. But I think what we're starting to hear in these very late stages of the contest is that Kenneth Clarke and his camp are getting a little bit despondent. Last night, one of their senior number crunchers was talking about Mr. Clarke winning by 10. By lunchtime today, they were talking about him maybe winning by 4 or 5. Now, I've been told by a senior figure in the Clarke camp of his serious worries that William Hague has won this contest and come through at the end of the day.
Only an hour or two ago, MPs were telling me, and quite senior figures on each side, that they thought it was too close to tell. It could even be a draw. The indications you're getting now are that the Clarke camp are sort of despairing.
No, they're not despairing. No. They still think it's a very close thing, but they're not confident that they've actually got the numbers to have clinched it. There's a lot of MPs are coming out and refusing to say which way they voted, and there is genuine uncertainty about this vote. I think one of the factors that the Clarke camp are worried about was the bad reception for the pact between Mr. Clarke and Mr. Redwood in a lot of newspapers today. Of course, that has tended to be the newspapers who are opposed to a single currency and who saw William Hague as the best hope of getting prospects of a single currency wiped out. But it may have been a factor in the contest today. Tories might have been worried about the kind of reception they were going to go on getting from Fleet Street if they chose and opted for the Redwood-Clarke leadership.
Robin, thank you very much indeed. Of course, this is the third round in a remarkably complicated voting system, which has resulted in a protracted ballot. As I said, it's been going on for well over a week. Let me remind you of the race so far. This is how they stood after the first ballot 9 days ago. Ken Clarke with 49 votes, William Hague 41, John Redwood on 27. But then the right-wing vote was split. Peter Lilley and Michael Howard had 47 votes between them, and when they dropped out for the second round, their votes scattered. On Tuesday, the 3 remaining runners took to the course again. Ken Clarke got 64 votes, William Hague 62, and John Redwood last on 38. And when he was knocked out, he made it a straight 2-horse race this afternoon. With Ken Clarke just a nose ahead on Tuesday, it's John Redwood's 38 backers that will decide who passes the winning post in the final straight. And those 38 votes, how are they going to go? 3 of them are with Nick Robinson now, just outside the main entrance to the Commons. Nick?
Not 3, in fact, but 2. We've got 2 Redwood backers. The third is no doubt on her way, Theresa Gorman. I'm joined by Dr. Julian Lewis, a Redwood backer, a new MP, and John Whittingdale, who was a Redwood backer, was into the Commons from 1992. Let's hear from you, first of all, what you both did. Julian Lewis, what did you do today?
I abstained today.
You abstained? You didn't use your vote at all?
No, I didn't.
Now, why that remarkable decision?
Well, I felt, as I would have felt if I'd been here in 1990 and been a supporter of Mrs. Thatcher, I had a choice between a consistent, strong left-winger and an inconsistent centrist. and I was not happy to give support to either. I felt that John Redwood was the candidate head and shoulders above the rest. I approve of what he has done. I'm sorry I couldn't vote for him in the final round.
But why did John Redwood not convince you that having him as Shadow Chancellor would deliver what you wanted?
I hope that John Redwood will be Shadow Chancellor, because I think that he is trying to make the best arrangement he can under difficult circumstances. He did not seek to try and convince me what to do. I would have been put in a false position by voting for Ken Clarke, whom I greatly respect but with whom I profoundly disagree, and William's position, I'm afraid, is too malleable.
John Whittingdale, did you take that approach? Did you abstain, or have you used your vote today?
No, I voted for William Hague today. I voted for John Redwood last time because of the views that he stood for, the fact that he made it clear he was opposed to a federal Europe, that he believed in free market capitalism, and since William Hague has made it clear that he shares those views, I voted for him for that reason.
And did the two candidates go to great efforts to try and woo you over the past day or so?
Well, the campaign has gone on a long time and we've spoken to all the candidates, but yes, I certainly had a long conversation with William Hague in which he set out precisely what he believed, and I found that I shared his views on almost all subjects, and so I was very happy to support him.
But you and others who'd supported John Redwood feared that that William Hague was another John Major, too malleable, too shiftable. Do you still fear that?
Well, William Hague has made his position very clear in the course of the last few days. I like what I've heard. He's put his position very clearly on the record, and on that basis I was happy to give him my support.
Very briefly, both of you talked to colleagues who backed John Redwood before. What's your sense of how they've done? Have they split all ways?
I think that's true, because they have been put in a no-win situation.
John Whittingdale?
I think that probably there has been quite a split down the middle, but every person has had to reach his own individual decision.
There's a howling gale blowing here at the prospect of whichever of these men become Tory leaders. Certainly a howling gale for someone. Back to you, Nick.
Well, of course, each time we've had a ballot, there's been grassroots consultation beforehand. It is only consultation. Let me remind you the results of the latest one. It was taken yesterday among activists, announced this morning, a little change from Tuesday's one. Ken Clarke's lead, though, has widened a bit in the constituencies. His 389 represents a bit under 60% of support from constituency chairmen and others. He still has a monopoly of members of the European Parliament, and although Lady Thatcher plumped for William Hague, most other peers have stayed pretty much in the same proportion. Clarke with 145, including, of course, Lord Tebbit, versus 32 for William Hague. Now, here in our studio in Millbank, just across the road from Parliament, is Sir Norman Fowler, who's a key Clarke supporter, and he's the man who provoked William Hague into what many saw as a gaffe, effectively ruling out Clarke's participation in a Hague cabinet, as many saw it. Here too, Michael Ancram from Hague's campaign team. Also a constituency activist, Agnes Hill, and columnist Simon Heffer. Let me start with you, Norman Fowler. You heard, and I wonder if you were dejected by what you did hear from Robin Oakley.
No, I think it's impossible to call it at this stage. It's obviously going to be close. We all know it's going to be close. The only thing I would say is that up to now, Ken Clarke has won on every level at every time. He's won both in the parliamentary level, and he's won also in the constituency votes as well.
But he's been savaged by this alliance with John Redwood. You don't have to look at the Tory newspapers this morning. In fact, the whole array of newspapers, they regard it as a betrayal, as an absurdity. The language has been...
But I mean, there's a lack of reality about this. If this party is going to get together again, if this party is going to come together, we're going to need to have agreements between John Redwood and Ken Clarke and William Hague. I mean, there's no other way of doing it. So unless one's content to have a situation where the party exists in separate factions forevermore, that may help one or two of the newspapers who you're talking about, but I don't think Tory MPs feel like that.
Well,
and certainly, I tell you this, the constituencies most certainly don't feel like that.
I just wonder how many Conservative MPs will have been influenced by that. Many of them were open to be influenced, Michael Ancram. Just listen to the Times this morning. You must have read this. The Conservatives throughout their history have been damned as the stupid party. Seldom in their history can any of their number have deserved the title more. The decision by Redwood and his closest supporters to endorse Clarke is an act of folly, malice and pique which diminishes them and their beliefs. You must have taken heart from that and other editorials this morning.
Well, I mean, obviously, if the newspapers come out that strongly as they did this morning, we hope that our colleagues in Parliament would be reading the newspapers and taking on board what the newspapers were saying. But in a sense, I mean, while Norman's quite right that all parties are coalitions and you have to have agreement come to one way or another between colleagues, I think yesterday was slightly different, and this is what the papers were picking up on. We were able to point out that we had a broad coalition behind William Hague, which was a natural coalition, which had grown without any arrangements being made, without any deals being made, without any jobs being offered.
Nobody's been promised any jobs at all?
Nobody in William Hague's campaign has been promised any jobs at all. He made that very clear right from the start. Whereas I think what we saw yesterday was what appeared to be an unnatural or an artificial alliance being put together, and I think that was what worried a lot of colleagues, and certainly that, I think, was what was reflected in the papers this morning.
Simon Heffer, as a journalist, interestingly, who has done what Theresa Gorman has done, from the right, you've now gone to support of Ken Clarke, but you've been very much a lone voice, or at least one of the few voices on the right doing that.
Well, I felt at the start of this campaign, and I wrote this 5 weeks ago in the Daily Mail, that if the choice came down between Ken Clarke and William Hague, the Tory party had to vote for Clarke, because he's a man of substance, he's a man who believes in something. And as Norman Fowler said, the differences between him and John Redwood are far fewer than the things that they agree on. And the party has to unite if it's going to have any chance of victory. It will only unite if the two factions of left and right get together. And that's why I can't understand why some of my colleagues in the press this morning have been so hysterical about this deal between Redwood and Clarke. Because if Redwood and Clarke aren't involved together, whoever is the next leader, this party's not going to have a future.
Agnes Hill, I wonder, I mean, pick up on that, in the constituencies like yours and St Albans and Hertfordshire, do people fear that the party has no future? Are you looking upon all this with horror?
We're looking on at horror with the way the MPs are behaving. Quite honestly, we're all Conservatives, we're all within the Conservative Party, and the left and the right, as far as we're concerned, really don't count. We belong in the Conservative Party because of our basic belief in the philosophy of the Conservative Party, and I think the activists are all quite angry at the way some of the MPs are behaving. I, as a chairman, have consulted very, very carefully with my membership, and I have reflected my membership's views when I've been able to cast my vote, albeit that vote not being worth very much. I think the MPs have missed a golden opportunity to include the activists in the voting of the leader of the party. I think that the way we vote for the leader of the party has to change. It's archaic, and I think it's been very destructive, and there's been a lot of bloodletting. It shouldn't have happened.
Even this consultation process, which is informing the
Absolutely.
MPs at least of what the grassroots thinks, even that seems to have been forced upon some members. Have they at least listened to your opinion?
I wish they had. I'm not convinced they have. I hear MPs on the television in the morning, in the evening, saying, of course, I'm going to do this. Where are they going to consult with their associations? I feel quite angry as an association that I don't have a voice, that my association doesn't have a voice because we no longer have an MP, because of the antics of the MPs.
Yours was actually a very strongly Conservative constituency, which you lost to Labour.
I mean, there are reasons why we lost. I mean, let's face it, we had a very big boundary change which affected us very badly, and nobody's mentioned that. But at the end of the day, yes, we lost, and we had a superb candidate. He was absolutely first class. David Rattley would have made a marvellous MP.
And your supporters, when you've canvassed in your constituency,
Yes.
they've been pro-Clarke. Now, supposing Clarke does lose and you get Hague, will everybody rally around him?
Yes, we have made a pact that there were views on both sides. I have to say that there were Clarke supporters, there were Hague supporters. We have made a pact that regardless of who becomes leader, we will go 100% behind that leader. And I just hope the MPs get their acts together and stop talking about what they consider is their right.
But can they? Sir Norman Fowler, we've heard from Clarke. He just doesn't see how he can sign up to what William Hague has demanded. We've heard the same thing from John Redwood. They simply can't go into a cabinet with him. They can't share with him.
Well, let's see what the result is, which we've only got to wait a few minutes for. But let's also agree, taking up the last point, that this is going to be the last time that the leadership election is going to be run on this basis. I agree with a great deal of what was just said, because I think, and certainly I was advocating a change in it before, I think it's a pity that the constituencies didn't have a direct vote in this election. And I think that there's now a growing consensus inside the parliamentary party that for the next elections, whenever they come, that the constituencies should have a part of that vote, and that part should be made up of one member, one vote.
Can I just point out, it's now about 12 minutes past 5. There are not that many votes to count. It's happening in Committee Room 13. They're then going across to Committee Room 10, I think, to announce the results. And we could hear that any moment. It came at the result came, well, I think about now, the other day. Michael Ancrum, do you want to pick up on? Have you been listening to the grassroots?
I think we've got to find a better structure for listening in the future, and I agree totally with Norman on that. I think there has been consultation, but it may not have been right across the board. In my constituency, I happen to have an AGM taking place, which we used, in fact, to take a straw poll on the first 5 candidates and got an indication of the way they felt. But I do think that if we're going to do this, we have to do it in a way which is organised, in a way where people know what their empowerment is, both as a member of an association and a member of Parliament, and they will be different. I don't think it's something we want to rush into. We've got time now after this election is over to look at this very carefully to make sure if there's ever another election of this sort, it would be under new rules, and those rules would be carefully thought out.
Let me just remind, if I can reach across you, to what the two men said yesterday about Hague, Clarke and Redwood. I mean, they basically were saying it's simply impossible for them to join in. Now, I get the impression you're slightly backtracking on that in the face of what could be a...
I'm not backtracking on anything. I was making the fairly obvious point that I don't know what the election result is going to be, so I'm not going to get into too much speculation.
But you're not ruling out the fact that they might serve in a...
No, let me say what the concern is. The concern was that the impression was given, and it was given in the meeting that we had, that anyone who went into the shadow cabinet would actually literally have to sign up to a pledge on Europe and the single currency. I mean, I know that because, as you rightly said, I actually asked the question, and therefore I listened to the answer quite clearly, and the answer to that was yes. Now, that would, in that crude form, appear to risk excluding someone like Ken Clarke. Now, that would be foolish. We can't exclude someone like Ken Clarke.
I think this is and was a misunderstanding, because what William was saying was that he stood on a platform. If he's elected, and I hope he is, then his supporters who voted for him would expect that platform to form the policy of the shadow cabinet. And as in any shadow cabinet, all the members would be expected to exercise collective responsibility. Now, that's very different from signing up to something.
I can see with John Whittingdale, Quentin Davies now is with Nick Robinson, my colleague, and down at Sir St Stephen's entrance, he's one of the campaign leaders for the Clarke camp. Nick.
Yes, here we are. I'm joined again by John Whittingdale, by Quentin Davies and Anne Widdicombe, who are both supporters of Kenneth Clarke. There's no point speculating about the actual result, but how does the party come together now, regardless of who wins? John Whittingdale, first of all, you used to work for Margaret Thatcher. Many people have said that this is a party still damaged by the wounds of her removal 7 years ago. Is it another 7 years till you recover from this?
No, I don't believe it is. I think the one thing that all of us will agree upon is that the Conservative Party has got to come together behind our new leader, whether that be William Hague or Kenneth Clarke.
Whatever the policy stands.
Well, there is a long-standing tradition that Conservative MPs do abide by the policy of the party. We may have some differences, but the one thing we're agreed upon is opposing the Labour government. That has to be our priority for the next 5 years.
Quentin Davies, many people have made this comparison with the 1980s and the Labour Party, the early 1980s. This leadership election has given every sense that that's exactly what it's like.
That's exactly what we're not going to do. We're not going to repeat the example of the Labour Party after 1970. No, we haven't. We have had an open democratic election in the early weeks of this Parliament. The matter will be resolved now in a few seconds' time, and we shall all support whoever is our new leader, because fundamentally what unites us all is so much more important than what divides us. Of course, in a democratic party there are differences of opinion on different policies. You would expect that. The important thing is what unites us is much more important than what divides us, and on that basis we will certainly coalesce behind whoever is our leader and a few members.
This campaign, we're just beginning to hear the result. Here we are, here's the result from Committee Room 10.
Well, I'm very glad it hasn't been a tie, anyway. The result of the third ballot for the leader of the Conservative Party is as follows. Kenneth Clarke, 70, William Hague, 92, 1 abstention, 1 spoilt paper. I therefore declare that William Hague...
Well, they said it would be a nail-biting finish, but a clear victory. You look devastated.
Well, I'm disappointed because I think that Ken Clarke is one of the great politicians of our time. I think that that is recognised in the Conservative Party, but I think it's recognised over the political spectrum. The decision's been taken. The lesson now must be for the Tory Party, this decision having been taken, to get behind the new leader. That's what we failed to do with John Major. We must succeed to do that with William Hague.
So, Michael Ancrum, a majority of 22, way beyond most people's expectations.
Yes, I think certainly way beyond what I was predicting myself, and obviously I'm delighted for William. But as Norman's just said, the important thing is that we've completed a very important process in our party, which is to elect our new leader. And it's very important that we all get round behind that leader now, that some of the differences of the last few weeks, which inevitably arise during election campaigns, are put behind us, that we can come together, recognise that the main enemy is this Labour government with this enormous majority, and our task is to reorganise our party to get the policies that are going to beat that Labour government at the end of the day.
These aren't differences that have emerged during the last few weeks of the campaign. These have been fundamental differences that have riven the party for years.
Every party, as we said earlier, is a broad coalition, but within a coalition you can bring people together in a common cause, and we have a very important cause now.
But you've now got someone as a leader who says either you support what I say on the key issue that has split this party, or you're out as far as
he says that is what his position was, it is what he has been elected on, and therefore that would be the position of the shadow cabinet. And within the shadow cabinet, people do exercise collective responsibility. This isn't a new doctrine of any sort. What we are looking for now, and I congratulate all the other candidates, particularly Ken, on the way that they've conducted this campaign, is for everybody to come together. William said yesterday he hopes that all the contenders will come into his shadow cabinet. We must come together, we must recognise that we have an enemy to beat. My goodness, we've got a struggle ahead of us. And the message tonight must be right across the party, let's get together and let's get out and let's beat Labour.
Let's quickly just review what the result has been if you've just joined us. They are up to the final winning post in this, the third ballot. 70 votes for Ken Clarke and 92 for William Hague. A resounding victory under the circumstances. And I can see, let's go down to Nigel Evans, I can see there now with Nick Robinson.
Nigel Evans, a key member of William Hague's campaign, you must be delighted.
Absolutely super, it was beyond our wildest expectations. We thought William was going to do it, but obviously this is just a clear victory, and absolutely super. We now have an opportunity for the entire party to get behind William. We will be a united party with a very clear platform. We go forward now to take a real opposition against Tony Blair.
A united party, you say. Is there a place for Ken Clarke in this?
I very much hope so, yes. Of course, we've got to extend positions now, I believe, to everybody in the party that we possibly can. That means all sorts of wings within the party. We are a broad church. We continue to be a broad church.
But you just spent all your time, and William did say that these people couldn't be in the shadow cabinet unless they agreed on the single currency.
There is an absolutely clear position as far as the single currency is concerned. But
I'm sure there is, but we don't know what it is.
Ken Clarke has been saying, his supporters have been saying that the single currency is not an issue. If it's not an issue, why should it be a problem for Ken Clarke to sit around the shadow cabinet table? I hope he'll do so, but I hope that there will be positions for a number of other people showing the broad spectrum of the Conservative Party.
Just briefly, as people look at this moment, what is a Hague leadership of the Tory Party going to be like? We look back in a couple of years.
It's going to be, as William said, a fresh start. Absolutely fresh start. We look forward now to ensuring that William Hague gets the full support of the party so that we can go forward now and ensure that in 4-5 years' time we can win the next general election.
Well, Mr Hague himself will be coming down any moment, and that's why you're hearing the photographers here keen to get a shot of him. We'll be back to you soon.
Simon Heffer, let me just remind you again of what Mr Redwood said, that if he had agreed to serve under Mr Hague, he would have had to eat his words. And Mr Clarke said Hague had put forward a single currency proposal on which neither John nor I could conceivably agree and retain any credibility whatever. So what do you think happens now?
Well, that's the key to it. If he can get Redwood and Clarke to serve in his shadow cabinet, he has some hope of uniting the party. If he can't get them to serve in his shadow cabinet, this is all going to happen again within a year, maybe even sooner than that.
But he's going to have to, he himself, William Hague, is going to have to eat his words to get them back into the shadow cabinet.
It's a very difficult way to start a leadership of the opposition. If you have to row back on what has become the main campaign statement of the last few days before you become elected, it puts him in a very embarrassing position.
Our political editor, Robin Oakley, is across the road in Parliament. Robin.
Hello, Nick. I've just been talking to some members of Kenneth Clarke's team, and they're drawing the conclusion that John Redwood was not able to draw enough votes across into their pact with him, that while he was happy to rejoin the mainstream of Conservative politics, a number of his followers were not prepared to do so. They wanted to stick with a hardline, Eurosceptic right-wing position and weren't willing to join up with Kenneth Clarke. They think that's what lost it for him. They think he lost some of his second-round votes to William Hague as a result of the pact, which now, after its initial promise for their side, appears to have been a gamble that failed. And what people are predicting now is that William Hague will be able to produce a united cabinet on a united shadow cabinet, that is, on his formula of opposition to a single currency, but that he will not be able to produce a united party because he will probably lose from the front bench both Kenneth Clarke on the left of the party and John Redwood on the right.
It's intriguing how the right has split. It looks as though on this occasion it was only possible for John Redwood to bring 6 of his original 38 supporters with him. 2 abstained, and all the others went to Hague.
Yes, that certainly seems to have been the problem for the Clarke-Redwood combination. I think at the end of the day, people did feel that it was going to be, as it was derided by opponents in the William Hague camp, an instability pact. The odd couple, they thought, could not last together. 1 or 2 MPs said to me, well, it's just crazy enough to work. But clearly the majority of the Tory party haven't taken that view, and as I was saying earlier, I think a number of them were unnerved to some extent by the newspaper reception this morning for the Redwood-Clarke pact, and they thought that that kind of attack in Fleet Street was going to go on and that they were going to be ridiculed, and I think they've opted for the safer platform of William Hague, which I think is going to mean a much younger-looking Conservative front bench. His support has come largely from the new intake and from young, thrusting figures, some of the retread MPs who've come back after a period out of the House of Commons, and I think we're going to see enormous changes on the Conservative front bench as a result of this.
Well, I think we're going to see William Hague in a moment emerging from St Stephen's, so let's go there. Nick Robinson is there, and I think Hugh Dykes is with him.
Well, Nick, we're waiting for William Hague, as you say, but here is a prominent pro-European from the Conservative Party, was in Parliament until recently, a backer of Ken Clarke. Is this the end for the pro-Europeans in the Tory party?
No, not at all, and we'll have to just see how the dust settles down now. It's obviously a disappointing result. I think Ken Clarke campaigned extremely effectively. He's going to be a very important force in the future, a very senior member of the party. It's not only about Europe, it's about other things as well, and this is obviously a disappointing result.
Not about Europe, it's been nothing else. It's been nothing else.
There were other things as well. There was the Redwood element, apart from European issues. All those things came into it, and the gap is somewhat bigger than we were hoping this morning.
But if Ken Clarke has to sign up to some agreement not to back the single currency in the next 5 or 10 years, do you think he should go into the shadow cabinet on that basis?
No, it's too early to tell all those questions. You need the dust to settle first of all. You need to ask Ken Clarke those questions. He's going to play a very significant role in his party. He's the most senior person involved in all these things. He's a very important person in the parliamentary party, and indeed outside, as was shown by the constituency results.
But for the first time in its history, the Tory party is now the anti-European party, isn't it?
Not, I wouldn't reach that dramatic conclusion yet. That's going far too far. We've just got to see how the dust settles. Hague himself was more open on European matters than some people
Mr. Dykes, I'm going to have to stop you. We're waiting for William Hague. He's just about to come out of this door. Thank you for your time, and we'll see him emerge in a second.
There's a huge crowd of photographers out there, and the flash cameras go as William Hague, the victor, emerges.
Certainly can.
I'm sure I'd like me just to say a few words. I'm obviously very pleased with the result. The Conservative Party has placed a great responsibility on me and done me a great honour in electing me as its leader. I've just spoken to the 1922 committee upstairs and said that I see it as my job not only to lead the party but to heal its divisions, that I owe it to every member of the party to make sure that I extend the hand of friendship and cooperation to all members of the party. I'm going to bring the party together. I'm going to take it back on the road to unity, to confidence, and back to power. And the whole Conservative Party is now going to work together to achieve that objective. Thank you very much.
Mr. Hague.
Adam Bolton. Adam Bolton.
Say no to a single currency.
Collective responsibility must be observed in the shadow cabinet.
Mr. Hague.
Nick Robinson.
Is there a role for Kenneth Clarke in your shadow cabinet?
I'll certainly be offering a senior position in the shadow cabinet to Kenneth Clarke.
But he...
no. Okay, we'll just step back a moment.
Well, there he is, if you've just tuned in. William Hague, the new leader of the Conservative Party. He got 92 votes to Ken Clarke's 70, aged 36, which Here's a fair indication, he says, of where he wants the Conservative Parliamentary Party to go. He wants a much younger party altogether. And Agnes Hill, here at Millbank Studio, just across there from where those pictures came, you would presumably, although you were hoping Clarke would win, be very much in favour of getting a younger party. If you go to Tory party conferences and look down from the gallery, they're nearly all bald or grey, aren't they?
I was chairman of the St Albans Young Conservatives in 1960, and I had 180 members. That has now gone by the board. We live in a different world. Yes, of course, I'd like to see a lot more younger members. I'd like to see us appeal to the younger age group of the 20 to 35s. I hope that that will now come with us. I'm delighted we now have a new leader of the Conservative Party, and we can all unite behind him. I think the differences on Europe are something of the past, because by the time we come to the next election, which could be in 4 years, we're looking at a very different animal. The political picture will be quite different. The Labour Party will have dealt a few blows by then, and what we pick up will be quite different. So I think Europe is a thing of the past. I don't think that's a divisive issue anymore, but I want to see a unified party, I want to see a united party, and all strands of the party brought in. I wish to goodness, and I'm sure a lot of my chairman colleagues will join me in this, that the three of them could have got together on Monday, sat down and sorted it out without going through all this bitter bloodletting that we've had. But I'm delighted we are where we are.
Janet Daly has joined us, columnist from the Times, a Hague supporter.
Telegraph, actually.
From the Telegraph, I beg your pardon. Hague supporter. Are you delighted? And secondly, do you think it's possible to heal the divisions now?
Oh, hysterical with relief. Absolutely ecstatic. The party, it seemed to me, was about to make itself a national mockery, and now it seems to me that just one generation of the party has made itself a national mockery, and there's just a chance that, I don't think it's so much a question of healing the divisions, actually. I think it's a question of being quite forcibly disciplined, and of bringing back the idea that once the party has taken a stand on something, it has a coherent and clear stand, and that those who don't agree with it have to either keep stum or find a civilized way to accommodate their disagreement.
Simon Heffer, very, very quickly, you were looking very, very grim. Do you not think that this can be made to work now?
No, I don't. I think that there will be another leadership contest within 2 years at the most on a new system, and who knows who will win that.
Well, let's go down to Nick Robinson again. I don't know if you heard that, Nick, but here Simon Heffer was predicting there might have to be a new contest in a couple of years. He just thinks that this simply isn't going to last. It's all unstable.
Well, I'm joined by a few people who have some reflections on that. Damien Green, new MP and a Clarke supporter, David Willett, former minister, and a Hague supporter, and John Townend, the chairman of the 92 group of right-wing MPs. Mr Green, let's start with you. You must be very disappointed. It's quite a big margin for William Hague.
It's a big margin, and that's the best thing for the party. It's very important that this result has been decisive. William has been very decisively elected as the new leader of our party, and the most important thing is for all of us to get behind him. You know, it's now a new party with a new leader, and we will all get behind him.
Including Ken Clarke in his shadow cabinet with that condition that William Hague has set?
I hope so. I hope everyone in the party will now get behind William Hague, who's been fairly and squarely elected our new leader. It's incumbent on all of us to do that.
David Willett, Simon Heffer in the studio there was just suggesting this won't end it. There'll be another debate, another leadership contest perhaps. Do you think this settles the issue?
I think that's to misread the mood of the party. The party does want the leadership settled, and the fact, as Damien said, that there was such a solid majority for William today means that the issue is settled, and a good thing too, and that means that we can now focus on the revitalisation of the Conservative Party.
But what is the role for pro-Europeans? Damien here represents that camp as being a little coy. Should they have a full part to play in the shadow government?
Oh, absolutely. And William Hague, in his remarks just now to the 1922 committee, went out of his way to signal that now we had to unite, that he would be looking to support from every part of the party, and he in return knew that he had a responsibility to every member of the parliamentary party and beyond. We can't afford the factionism and the disunity that did us so much damage in the last election.
Well, John Townend here, if anybody's leader of a faction you are, you're chairman of the 92 group of right-wing MPs, has your faction won?
Well, I wouldn't say my faction won, but what I'm delighted is that I did write to all our members and say we should unite round William Hague, because I thought he was the best prospect for a good future for the party. I think it's the end of the European issue as a major cause of disruption in the Conservative Party. William has said that he is against the single currency in principle. The vast majority of the party will accept that.
Ms Townend, sorry to stop you there. David Curry from Kenneth Clarke's camp. What's your reaction to this result?
I'm very pleased that the result is a decisive result. It's very much in the interest of the party, but it should be decisive. That has happened. And I thought that William's words about leading and healing were exactly the sentiments which we wanted to hear, and I'm glad that he made them.
The new leader's made it very clear that he's going to offer Ken Clarke a job on the terms that he laid out during this contest, which is he must rule out the single currency. Will you go along with that?
That is a matter for William to discuss with the other candidates. Everybody needs to have some time to think.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Back to the studio.
Michael Ancram, of course, it's easy to think that the problems are over. You've got a new leader now. Of course, you weren't rejected at the election because Mr. Major was leading you. You were rejected because people didn't like your policies.
Well, one of the things we've got to do now, and we've got time to do it in opposition, is to make sure that, consistent with our principles, we build a package of policies which in the year 2001 or 2002 is going to be relevant and attractive and is going to bring back that support which we lost.
But it's going to be a long haul.
It's going to be a long haul, but you know, Simon was talking about the uncertainties of the next 2 years. I think a lot of people have underestimated William Hague. I got to know him very well over the last 4 weeks in working for him. He's a remarkable young man and he can do it.
OK, he got 92 votes to 70 compared to Mr. Clarke. He is the victor. He will go now to Conservative Central Office, where at 6 o'clock there will be a laying on of hands and he will formally take over from Mr. Major. At the same time, the news will be starting here. That is the news at 6 o'clock on BBC One. We leave you now with a look back at some of the extraordinary events of the past 6 weeks.
When the curtain falls, it's time to get off the stage, and that is what I propose to do.